All right. We are going live now. How's everybody doing out there? I hope everybody is well, taking care of themselves, doing some things to keep yourself busy, keep yourself educated. Just getting things situated here. This is Voltage Control Lab, Odd City Live. We are live. Hopefully, people can get their way in here. Yeah, so here we are. I figured today we'll start looking a little bit at a couple of tools in the Arturia V collection. I don't know if anybody saw they're doing a half off deal right now, and for the price, it's kind of a steal. 250 for 25, 24, 25 instruments, and a few of those are modular instruments. Many of them are classic synthesizers that uh, really are some of the bread and butter synthesizers throughout the last 50 years. Uh, Classic tools that were used to make some of the biggest tracks of the last 50 years, some of the most outlandish avant-garde tracks in some cases. So just thought this would maybe be a sensible time to take a look at some of these synthesizers and uh, talk about them a little bit, especially the ones that tend to get our most the maybe fall into our area of interest the most. Maybe they're all of interest since we're probably all music makers, producers, uh, composers. So some of these things might be redundant with to tools that you already have in your DAW, and but most likely they're all going to be pretty useful, pretty uh, applicable tools. Give us a shout out if you're in the chat room. Hopefully, you guys can hear me and hear some of that. We'll know in a minute. So, let's switch around to this view so we can see what's going on here. I'm going to get this out of here. This is just kind of filling some space. And maybe we'll bring this down here so I can see what you guys are saying. Okay. So, the V collection, basically here, this is the list of them. Basically, a collection of classic synthesizers and organs and keyboards, tools of the last 50 years, as I mentioned. So we're going to see things in here that might be a little bit more straightforward, might be a little bit more immediately approachable. Things like this piano instrument. Um, we have pianos, we have a few different organs, the B3, the what else do we have in here? The clavinet, not really an organ, but an electric piano. We have the Stage 73. This is kind of an electric piano, a Rhodes type of thing. Might need to come into the interface a bit, and especially this piano is often maybe a little bit quiet. We'll turn up the gain. It's a pretty good sounding piano. Whoa. Okay. And it's definitely crapping the bed with the CPU thanks to the software going. Okay, so or thanks to the stream going. Okay, well let's try this out. This should, in theory, still work, but if this all falls apart, maybe we'll just go with some sort of Q&A session or something like that. I kind of like the distortion that gave though. Okay, stage piano. Maybe what we could do is employ the Max for Live device that I built. This machine learning device. Let's try this out. Let's see if this just blows the whole damn thing up. Okay. Let's increase our note length. Restart this again. Okay, let's see what this does. Steve, what's up? Wambra, how you doing? Thanks for joining us. Okay, so I've got this machine learning Max for Live device going. It's playing for us. And blowing the damn thing up a little bit. Just stop that for a second. We can turn it back on. Okay, so here is one of our maybe more vanilla instruments, right? We saw at the bottom of the piano, there were some settings down there. We can choose from a whole lot of different pianos. Many of our instruments are going to show us kind of the basic interface that we're generally going to see if we're using the real instrument. In this case, the Fender Rhodes piano. There's going to be a lot of presets along the top. Of course, these are going to be presets for this kind of instrument, so they might be, if we're not dealing with a synthesizer, these might be very minimally different from one to the next in terms of the sound or tone. Or then we might get something weird like that. We have two different kinds of Rhodes keyboards here. Something going on in the phaser or the delay down here. So we can get some tonal difference. If we drop this arrow here, then we get some additional controls over the actual tines. Notice that it looks like now the cover has been removed from the instrument, and in the background we can see these metal bars. This is kind of how an electric piano works, right? These tiny little metal bars, well, tiny in the high frequency bars anyway. These things are excited by a hammer. They're right? It's similar to a real piano. We press a note, a hammer swings and knocks into one of these metal bars. As it vibrates, a pickup, a dedicated pickup, picks up the vibration of that metal bar and converts that into an electrical signal, which comes down and comes through our speaker. So here, once we hit this top button, we're opening up the device to access controls that we might not have access to even on the real instrument, at least without opening up the whole thing, right? We might have to actually open up the Fender Rhodes, hopefully knowing what we're doing, and maybe we can dampen things. Maybe we can lay a piece of felt across all of our tines, or we can use a harder hammerhead instead of a softer hammerhead. These are things that we might be able to do, though maybe it would be a hassle, in a real instrument. But, right, this is what we would probably step up to if it was a real instrument. So there's a lot of instruments like this, right? The B3 might be another one of these. Let's go back up to the V collection here. The B3, of course, is going to be a B3 organ. And maybe we can turn this thing back on. We've got a cat in the room. Okay, let's see if we can get this thing going. Or are we going to crash Ableton? There it goes. Okay, so here's the B3. Let's reset our model. Record something else in here. Build that. And play me something. Oh, don't worry, this sometimes happens. Let's see if it recovers. There it goes. Coming back, coming back. There's probably some Bernie Worrell presets in here. So, the organ's a fun instrument because even when this thing isn't playing, we have. Cat's chewing on my headphone cable. We have the tone wheels. Let's turn off this thing. So the tone wheels, maybe if we simplify, let's maybe go back to just like in a jazz organ. These represent harmonics, right? And as we dial these in, we're going to get more harmonically complex tones. This is the top organ, so we're going to wrong ones. Let's try these. I didn't see any other artist names in there. I think they have to be careful about naming presets. And we get two levels of this organ. I think if we have two keyboards, we could play both of these. Of course, we have to turn these on. And I'm sure there's probably a keyboard split function. Okay, so here's drawbar modulators. We can assign MIDI CCs to handle the drawbars, so we can actually move in and change slider or knob levels. We have a step sequencer built in here. I don't know if this is for the drawbars or what. I guess so. Yeah, drawbar modulator. Let's change steps to 8 or something. Maybe we have to assign this to drawbars. I haven't really played with this. You can see this is getting pretty complicated. We can, I think, do key splits here. We have a couple of different tone wheel modes. So then we have an effects page, MIDI assignment. There's definitely a way to do the key splits, but I'm not familiar enough with this particular one. Oh, mix? No. It's in here somewhere. But there's a bunch of other organs as well. Please play the super high notes in a chord. Hopefully that's not too shrill, but Okay, we have a few other organs in here. The Farfisa is a classic. This one was used by Pink Floyd. I'm sure the B3 was used by Pink Floyd too. Um, let's turn this thing back on. Timing might be all wonky on this, but let's open this thing up. We're not going to look at all of these basic instruments, but I just wanted to get an idea of some of the world of instruments in this bundle and how some of these things kind of operate in a similar way. Okay. Bad. Okay, so we've got some effects. We've got this instrument, which looks pretty much the exact same as the original instrument. As we get to some of the synthesizers, there might be a few liberties taken in terms of the interface, especially something like the DX7, where the interface is kind of almost non-existent. If we open this thing up, we get some micro tuning control, right? Each of these things is basically a micro tuning dial for each individual note of the scale. We get some control over the bass tones. You can see there's a bass manual section. That's for this bass octave. Maybe a little bit loud for the bass manual. And we can play with the wave. And maybe we need to open up that filter. We've got polyphonic and paraphonic modes, an envelope control for the bass section, tremolo controls. Right, this is basically the layout of. Let's turn off this thing. We've got different tone wheels here. These aren't really tone wheels, they're tone switches. But as we turn these on, so we're starting to see that on most of these instruments, we can pop them open, we can fine tune them. We can, of course, use them in their more vanilla kind of saccharine loading functionality. The Wurlitzer, the this is another electric piano. And when we open it up, we have some controls in the background, dynamics, tuning, stretching, right? Some tonal shaping, vibrato, things like this, a built-in EQ. And then at the bottom of many of these, especially the basic pianos, we're going to see these kind of sets of effects. So if we want to add some of these internal effects, we can. Of course, we can put some after the plugin as well. Okay, so that's kind of the maybe the keyboard section, and then we start getting into the more interesting stuff, right? Um, no notification, huh, Skull? I'm gonna have to look into that. Usually, it does it when I post the. Well, it doesn't do notification per se, but it will give the indication that I've listed the stream when I create the stream, but that's usually a little bit ahead of time so I can give people the links. So you might make sure to hit the bell button, not to be that guy on the YouTube channel, but the bell button will turn on notifications. Maybe you already have that going and it's just a YouTube fart. Who knows? But okay, is this making sense so far? I think now we'll dive into some of the maybe more interesting and synthy side of this stuff because you know, we have kind of a family of real, you know, more physically driven instruments. I guess an organ isn't really that, right? But these are maybe more what I would think of as keyboard instruments rather than synthesizers. The organs, the B3, the electric pianos, the clavinet. There's also the Farfisa organ. The Vox Continental is an organ. We have the electric pianos like the clavinet, the Wurlitzer, the stage piano, the real piano. And then we have a huge collection of classic synthesizers. Okay. The first one at the top of the list is everybody's favorite, the ARP 2600. And this is kind of what Arturia has been known for a long time is these modular synthesizer plugins that give us kind of our, you know, let us get our hands wet with modular synthesizers and with, of course, classic synths like the ARP. So we can kind of scroll down and see all of the levels of this ARP. Up here at the top, this is kind of the suitcase synth that we're all used to seeing. This is our 3 oscillator, modular, semi-modular synthesizer. We have a preset patch here that loads up with it, which includes the sequencer at the bottom here, the 16-step sequencer. And at the bottom, we have the keyboard control. And on the ARP 2600, a lot of the keyboard-based controls include things like our glide times, of course, our transpose functions. Whoop, hello. There it goes. Had a little drop out there. Let's make sure this is all still going. Okay, we're still good. Okay, so yeah, this is an ARP 2600. Let's find up here in the presets. Actually, I think we can go here, new preset, and that will clear the decks for us. Now, when we do this, notice all of those cables that were connected have been removed, right? There's only 2 cables coming up here now to the gate and the trigger input. Those are coming from the sequencer. The sequencer, it looks like, is receiving mod wheel information from the keyboard. So the sequencer is basically just sending, okay, I see. The start is coming up here into the gate. The trigger is doing the reset functions. That's for our envelope to reset. Okay, let's look at this. We have a preamp, an input section, essentially, right? We're taking signal in, and then we have an envelope follower, a ring modulator, which we can route a signal elsewhere in the patch. We have 3 oscillators. Here's 1, 2, 3. Okay. We have some signal outputs. This first one brings keyboard CV in to this VCO. Sample and hold, envelope control. So as we raise and lower these sliders, we get more, we get hardwired, more complex modulation, tonal shape. And there we get signal coming in from VCO2 doing some hardware or hardwired frequency modulation. And VCO2 is out of tune slightly. Double click that, I believe it goes to 0. Each of these oscillators has a frequency control in semitones or fine tuning. We have an oscillator sync function. This will take sync from oscillator 2. So as we change the frequency of oscillator 2, the VCO1 will start to become more complex in its tonality. The wave shape will, as we play with the tuning here, start to get a little bit more complicated. Let's bring this up. Something broke. Well, if this happens, we can hit this little panic button at the bottom. In theory. Let's turn off that. I think we were getting out of the range of modulation there. Okay, so we've got signal, we've got an oscillator, or rather an octave. And we can go down into low frequencies as well. So if we want to use this oscillator as a LFO, we can do that. We've got 2 outputs that we can wire out from this oscillator. Sawtooth wave, which we can invert to get a ramp wave, and square wave. VCO2 has all of these same things in addition to noise generator, or that's coming in from the noise generator, sorry. We have a sine and a triangle wave output. That seems like it's the main difference here. We have VCO input coming in as well from VCO1. And VCO3 is similar to number 2, all the same functionality, except we can take signal from VCO2. Oh, we have to turn this up, turn this down. That would help. And it's not taking keyboard control for some reason. All of these things feed into our filter. The filter has fine tuning for frequency as well. It has resonance. We have notch frequency for notch mode. We have a number of different modes here: low pass 24, 12, high pass 12, band pass 12, and notch filters. Never forget, we can perform fun frequency modulation. I want to grab that cable. Okay, I have not spent enough time in the ARP 2600, but here we have a very complicated synthesizer, and if we can spend some time learning this device, this will be in, a one-to-one functionality applicable to a real ARP 2600. So when you get that big dirty B ARP, you can apply that knowledge to this plugin. All right, we have the classic Buchla easel, one of the recent additions. To the package. Sorry, just turning off my heater. Okay. Hey, Mark. Hey, Astrofish. What's up, Kylie? Thank you guys for joining us. Okay. All right, and here's the music box. We might find that there are additional functions here so that we can maybe control how the device responds to our gestural performances. And we have really the kind of basic functionality of the Buchla easel. We have a 5-step sequencer up here. We have an attack, sustain, decay envelope generator, a pulsar, LFO basically. We have our modulation oscillator and our complex oscillator to perform amplitude modulation, frequency modulation. This is the type of thing that the make noise DPO, every complex oscillator is kind of taking its cues from the Buchla complex oscillator, of which there were a number of different takes on that, but nonetheless, some maybe recognizable functionality in here. A dual low-pass gate. We talked about low-pass gates the other day. These are low-pass filters with no resonance that we use as voltage-controlled amps. It says here, low-pass filter combination voltage-controlled amp. So here we can control the overall level, right? If we want to just drone, we can just turn up the level numbers. Whoa, yeah. And then we can also route keyboard control into control the level. So we have MIDI connections, random voltage generator, and then all of these banana plugs, these cables, these allow us to route signal throughout the instrument. So again, we're going to notice many presets in here. Oh yeah, that one really blew up the CPU. Start from a new preset. Of course, this only has, what, like 2.5 octaves on it, but we can play and access all of the octaves on our MIDI keyboard. Yeah, so let's try turning on this complex oscillator. three modes on this envelope generator: sustained, transient, and self. Sustained gives us our attack, sustain, decay envelope. Transient gives us an attack, decay envelope, no sustain. I guess sustain becomes hold. And then self, which just becomes a looping attack, decay envelope. We can choose where it's getting its signal from. Is it being triggered by the pulsar, by the sequencer? Anyone else want to answer Jin's question there? What's the verdict from experienced users? Anybody in here, anybody else in here have opinions on this? Mark says he has the previous version, really likes it. I just got this a few weeks ago, and I've been kind of blown away, to be honest. I think it's really a great sounding package. Yeah, I don't know. Kind of depends on if you have other tools that kind of fit some of these roles. I think that's maybe a personal, decision. Depends on whether you have a tool set that will give you the the set of functions, the set of synths and things of this nature that you want to use. But I think especially for that sales price, 24 instruments of all varieties, I think it's a hard bundle to beat, frankly. I have Complete as well. Complete is another kind of very popular and commonly used bundle. These things kind of stretch across styles and use cases. So I think it's really a question of what works for you. There's maybe less specifically drum oriented tools in here. It's really more keyboards. But that we can make any kind of sound with a synthesizer, and some of these certainly have drum samples in them and the capability of synthesizing drum sounds. So probably a lot of drum presets as well. So maybe that's one area that it's a little bit different than under other bundles. It's mainly keyboard-oriented synthesizers, but there's, again, one of Arturia's big things is modular synthesizer emulation. And I think the emulation on some of these things is kind of mind-boggling, to be honest. The ability to learn dozens of classic synthesizers and instruments, and then be able to actually take that knowledge and apply it on a real hardware synthesizer, I think is something special, as opposed to maybe having to learn a whole new complicated interface that might have modular functionality in it, but might not necessarily connect to the real world and the history of what we do. Okay, so this is the CMI. I think this is the Fairlight, right? The CMI Fairlight. The classic CMI sound. This is a sampler from the 80s used by every huge producer in the 80s. It had this little pen tool, so you could actually draw and write on a screen. The screen didn't look nearly as maybe detailed and refined as this one does. But this is kind of how the system worked, right? It had a dedicated computer with a floppy drive, right? You put a floppy disk in here. You kids maybe don't never even heard of a floppy disk. We have oh, that's kind of cool. We have like an old school style. I never noticed that. An old school style clicky um, keyboard for typing in names and things like that. Some control, like macro controls, kind of. You see, this is the MIDI controller C1 with dedicated control for the filter, sample start, vibrato, all of this stuff, right? Keyboard with some macros and macro switches. Okay. Now, we don't have to operate the synthesizer like this. We can click on the screen and it zooms in and it shows us all of the different functions inside of the software. Okay, so here's a sample. This is that choir sample we were just hearing. And we have a lot of common controls that we're going to see in a sampler, right? We have sample start and sample length, looping, loop start and loop length. These are separated from the sample start and end point. And notice when we move these things around, the actual flags up above start moving around as well. We could do a pendulum type of loop. We have tuning controls. We have our envelope for volume control. We have our vibrato here and portamento with glide time, right? This is some basic sampling. This is early sampling. The early days of audio manipulation. We don't necessarily have layers and layers and layers, though it does have a tuning and a sample map section, though we're limited to 8 samples. That's another thing we saw. Or was it 10? I guess it's 10. So here are our 10 sample slots down here. We can load a sample. When we select the load function, we can load a sample from our computer. Or let's see, how else can we load a sample? If we go to edit, is that it? No, let's see. Browse. This is it. Okay, so here we're now looking at the sample library that comes with the original CMI Fairlight. And so inside of this, we're going to have tons of samples that you might recognize. Yeah, bassoon samples that might not be like the most recognizable sample in here. One would be the orchestra hit. Let's see. Here we go. That's the one, right? From Looking for a Perfect Beat by Africa Bambaataa and so many other people. Yeah, one thing Astrofish was just mentioning with FM patches, I assume you're talking about the ARP, the not the best audio quality, which I think is probably specifically related to the fact that that's an analog synthesizer, and at this point we're all really familiar with digital FM, right? The much more controllable digital FM sound that is in an analog synthesizer, a lot less controllable. The tuning, all of these little things start to come into play. Also, it might not be doing exponential FM, it might be doing linear FM, which tends to sound less, it tends to track pitch a little bit less, cleanly. And I think in general, just dealing with analog FM, it's a lot harder to kind of rein that in. Whereas with digital, we can get very, very precise in terms of tunings and things like that. Now, maybe you're talking about other audio quality related things, but that seems like it's kind of in that direction. But um, yeah, so tons of samples in here. Fart. Yeah. Okay, we're loading fart. Fuck it. Now, what happens when we come into fart here? And look at this. Also, another very important point with the Fairlight is that this was an '80s synthesizer. This instrument is trying to recreate the character of those synthesizers and samplers, and those devices were working at very low sample rates. You can see here, sample rate 14,080. Right now, we could raise that. I broke it. There it goes. We can reduce the bit depth as well. You can see it was already just in the middle at like 8 bits. So super, super low quality to adhere to the true nature of this original instrument, right? The instrument that it's based on. So we have quite a bit of sample editing functions in here, at least sample editing functions that were present in old samplers. We can do, I believe, some time stretching of our samples in here. The spectral synth and the time synth I haven't played so much with. The spectral synth is going to use a frequency spectrum, and in theory, we can alter that spectrum. So this is more of an additive synth, right? We have a bank of 32 sine wave oscillators. Each one of those are tuned in a certain way, and depending on how we play around with the spread, the nature of these things, then we get this kind of altered tonal character. We can also maybe change what type of wave shape we're working with. Of course, is polyphonic. Okay, we have some controls. We have switches, those macros, things like this. Um, Quite deep, right? This is our function generator, our envelope generator, basically. Um, there's our sample browser. There's a built-in sequencer, like a 32-step sequencer. We can create patterns and chain them together. There's a mixer for all of our sounds, and then we can map certain notes to or samples to certain notes on the keyboard. Um, if we were look at a more modern sampler like Contact, then we could load thousands of samples into one setting, one preset, and map all of those to pitches and velocities and maybe other functions on the keyboard. But here we're dealing with certain things, right? We're dealing with certain limitations in this old school device. But It's pretty true to form. I don't know if you'll ever get your hands on a CMI. That might be extra difficult these days, but it's there. We have the CS80, classic, completely unaffordable and rare, now rare synthesizer. Um, Roman from Black Corporation, of course, famously designed the Deckard's Dream synth, which is a CS80 clone with a couple of extra bells and whistles on it. It doesn't want to open the CS80. There it goes. And this is not the first time I opened this, so I don't know why it gave me that menu, but very complicated synth. We've got two oscillators up here. We can kind of mix together some of our wave shapes. We have some noise. We can choose, do we want a triangle, saw, square, two voltage controlled filters, two voltage controlled amps with envelopes built in, right? Touch response controls. Let's see, what else? A built-in ring mod, a built-in sub oscillator. Here's our preset, the classic preset interface anyway. Of course, up here we have dozens and dozens and dozens of presets, so we don't have to use this thing if we don't want to. Some control over the keyboard. We have a built-in ribbon controller, right? We have to play a note. This can control pitch. Kind of like a pitch bend wheel. Notice it doesn't have a pitch bend wheel, really. So, arpeggiator, built-in arpeggiator. Some controls for built-in chorus and delay, and some glide pedal expression controls, things like this. And then we have some modulation routing, some kind of multi-routing. I think this is, I've never used the multi-routing. This would, I guess, go to, I guess it's keyboard mapping. Portamento. Yeah, I haven't played too much with the multi-routing. The modulation here, we get modulation sources and destinations. And where are our LFOs? You can see there, it gives us the option of LFOs, sub-oscillator, envelope generator from the filter, or amp on voice 1 or 2. We can map velocity, aftertouch, ribbon control. Okay, so there we go. We can route the ribbon to do something that's not pitch. Let me turn that off. And now we can have the ribbon control, manipulate, filter cutoff. So I'm not sure where the LFOs are, but they're somewhere around here. Maybe it's these. I don't know. We'd have to look. Maybe we have to use our oscillators as LFOs. I don't think so, though. Maybe these. CS80, really cool polyphonic synthesizer. A lot of great tonal characters in there. The CZ is going to be a wavetable synth, early wavetable synth. If it will open. Oh, there it goes. Now I closed it again. There it goes. Not wavetable, phase distortion, and we have a few different waveforms up here that we can use. That's vibrato. Let's see. Let's bounce this down, and then we get access to the synth engines. Line 1. Here we can choose our different wave shapes. Couple of macros, vibrato, and a built-in arpeggiator. Oh, it doesn't like that. It's maybe a little bit too much for the live stream. Getting too hot. We, of course, have our classic DX7, Jupiter 8, Matrix 12, right? These are some of our classic synthesizers. Maybe we'll try to push it along here because I don't want to do much longer than an hour today. Maybe we'll do the other half of these another day. Any of these in particular you guys want to see? We can pull those up and have a look. Oh yeah, that one's... The only reason these are pushing the CPU so high is because I'm doing the live stream. I've never seen them push the CPU this high. Mellotron, really nice tape loop instruments. Oh, that's still the Matrix. Oh yeah. Violin, cello, and flute, or we can have all of them going at once. So when we open this up, we start to see the motor in here. We have tape saturation and some controls of the actual quality of the tape. Right, mechanics, you could hear turns up the kind of gears cranking inside. Control over the built-in envelope. Oh yeah, now it's... This is called strawberry flutes because that sound... It's supposed to sound like strawberry fields. Right. Instrument that was made famous by that song alone, I would think. We have the Minimoog, pretty accurate representation of the Minimoog here. Probably the most accurate representation. By the way, just a reminder, the Minimoog Model D app for iOS is free right now. The Korg iK oscillator is also free for iOS as well as Android. So this is the classic Minimoog. Controller functions on the left-hand side for glide and tuning, global tuning. What we want to use, do we want to use our oscillator 3 or a noise generator as our modulation source? Our 3 oscillator bank. The mixer, which mixes our 3 oscillators here, turns them on or off here, also gives us access to white or pink noise with volume level there. And we can dial in a feedback loop using the external input volume. The filter and resonance, right here. If we look at other emulators of the Minimoog, we might find that they give us more filter options. But this is true to the original, right? You know what this stuff is? Okay. So oscillator bank, mixer, filter, modifiers. Notice that the envelopes here have attack, decay, and sustain time and no release time. The release is controlled by the decay time. So classic instrument, right? Guess we have to hold shift to fine tune. Yeah, there we go. There's even a polyphonic switch over here. Though it's not working. Let's see what might be. Not getting any polyphonic performance out of that. Here's built-in ARP and LFO. We can record gestural controls and use those as modulation sources. Here's a modulation matrix like we saw earlier. Sources of modulation to destination of modulation. This is stuff you never see in the hardware version of the Minimoog. And some built-in effects, including a vocal filter. Interesting. So a few different bells and whistles added on here. Yeah. And then we get into the Moog modular. This is maybe what ARTURIA is most known for, going back probably 20 years almost that they've been making this one. Will it open? It will. Not if I keep hitting that button, though. Here we go. All right, so here we have the Moog Mini, or it's not Mini, it's just the Moog modular. Let's go to a new preset here. And so we have a collection of modules. I believe we can swap out some of these modules. Let's see. There we go. So if we click at the top of these, we get some module options. Filters. These small ones will get envelopes, trigger modules, envelope followers, sample and hold, which we can use as random random signal generators if we route noise into them. And down here, these we have drivers, oscillators. You can see a number of oscillators, an LFO. Here's some more envelopes. Right, this top row appears to be the modular section, the part where we can actually choose and kind of tweak what modules we want. Down here, these seem to be pretty hardwired in. We have some modular routing down here. Scrolling down, we have a sequencer and a filter bank, a delay module, a phaser, some keyboard controllers. This one is not polyphonic. Looks like we can turn it on polyphonic though. One of those functions that you're not going to get very easily in a real modular synthesizer. So pretty stacked layout here. This is going to take a little bit of looking at and getting used to. Each of these oscillators has a wave shape output. We can route them into the different drivers and filters and things like this. We have to actually route things piece by piece all around here, right? Oscillator 1 is a sawtooth wave routed out to the soft clipping input on, I think, this driver. That's routed out up to our filter. Which is being modulated by our envelope here. We have to turn it down to really hear it though. Notice that there's these little orange rings here and there. If we hover and then click and turn that, that controls the intensity, the amplitude of that envelope's control on the filter frequency. And down here it says K1. No, I think that's going to be key tracking. I would have to check that. But another big, complicated modular synthesizer that we're going to have to spend a little bit of time using, experimenting, looking at. Okay, well, maybe we'll look at some of these other ones on another day. Don't want to burn us out. Questions? I think tomorrow we'll do a Q&A discussion. Bring in your synth questions. Bring in your production questions. Anything you want to talk about. Anything you want to know about. I also just received a module in the mail, which I'm letting devirus, and then maybe tomorrow, probably maybe more like Monday or something, we'll look at that in a live stream. It is called Dot, and it is from. I feel like a jerk now for not knowing this, but let's see. Let me just remind you who it's from. It's a Euclidean rhythm and trigger sequencer, and it's coming from Ukraine. And I'm going to tell you in just a second when my email opens. Good grief. Maybe it will never open. Okay. Well, Q&A tomorrow. We're going to do a modular overview, review. There it comes up here. Well, I'll fill you in on the name of everything when we actually cover the module. That would probably be the most sensible. So, but hey, it's another live stream. We made it. We're going to do another one tomorrow and Saturday. And Sunday, I'm going to take the day off because I need a day off. And yeah, that's maybe where we'll wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining us, you guys. Really glad to spend a little bit of time with everybody. Tomorrow, maybe we'll structure it a little bit more like an office hour type of thing where please, if you guys have any ideas, if you want to send me any links you want us to listen to, sounds you want to recreate, we might be able to pull that off. Might get a copyright strike, but whatever. We're just going to do it because the times are changing and no one's really going to give a fuck about copyright strikes in a pretty soon, I think. So the AI will, I guess, but we'll find out what we can get away with. So sounds you want to remake, things like this, bring in those requests tomorrow. We'll try to do a Q&A every week. And other questions, synth, production, modular, whatever those questions might be, gear, bring them on in. We'll get into it. We'll talk about whatever's happening and try to make it a little more relevant for you. Cool. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Astrofish, Wambra, Jin. I can't say your name, but thank you for coming in here. Michael, great seeing you. All right, you guys, take it easy. Go check out DivKid's website, divkidvideo.com. He's creating a schedule, a catalog of different live streams related to modular and synth. Boiler Room just launched their live streaming thing this morning with Black Madonna doing a 2-hour set from her kitchen. Autechre were just live streaming on Mixer, or is it Mixlr? Mixlr, I think is what it was. I don't know what that service is, but that was kind of cool. So keep your ears out, keep your eyes out for some cool new music and live streams. And maybe if you hear about any good ones, bring those in tomorrow too. All right, you guys. See you next time. Have a great day.